Hello. Thank you for having us, Remote Forensics. It's an absolute pleasure to present and get this opportunity to share our experiences with remote learning. Just as Rachel said, today we're going to talk about 360 virtual reality for remote teaching of analytical chemistry, specifically around a module on our masters for forensic science and forensic toxicology. And this was a project that myself and my colleague Caroline, and we'll both introduce ourselves in the next slide, that we put together into making more immersive learning. So ladies first, Caroline, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello everyone. Yes, just want to add my thanks to Jonathan. Thanks for having us. So I'm Dr. Caroline Pollard, and I'm one of the 2 teaching fellows in our King's Forensics department, and I'm the teaching fellow for the Analytical Toxicology Master's Programme. I've been fortunate to do my PhD at King's Forensics as well, which has been quite helpful for when wanting to transfer these practicals online. But yes, that's me.
And I'm Dr. Jonathon Brooks, and I'm the teaching fellow for the Forensic Science MSc, and I did my PhD at the University of Leicester and also lectured at Leicester and multiple institutions, either as guest lecturers or part-time staff in similar subjects or around my specialist subject, which is forensic taphonomy. So module that we are going to be talking about today is the analytical chemistry for forensic science and analytical toxicology. And so I'm module lead for this subject. And really, because of the students that we have for both the course, the forensic science and analytical toxicology, they come from an array of undergraduate backgrounds. So this module really is to get them onto a platform where they're able to understand analytical aspects. So really the module is to better understand the physiochemical properties of chemicals, but also to describe the functionality of these compounds when we're looking to analyze them by analytical instruments. So the 4 techniques that we're talking about predominantly is gas chromatography, ultraviolet spectroscopy, infrared spectroscopy, and liquid chromatography. Traditionally, this has been taught basically by lectures and workshops around kind of the basic chemical properties. We then start to introduce the very basic principles of these instruments. So going into kind of, I would say almost kind of A-level kind of level to make sure that we're kind of starting at a very same position for all the students, and then gradually increase the difficulty as we progress within the module. And this again is still delivered by lectures and some aspects of practicals to get them to kind of apply the knowledge they've learned in the lectures. And then obviously what they're doing as part of the lectures and workshops and the additional practical is applying what they've learned in the chemical properties lectures to the instruments as an overall. Caroline?
Yes. So it was pretty obvious that we have to change how we were running the practicals as well as the overall module, thanks to COVID. And just to give you a bit of background, we were quite fortunate that our department decided to move the start of the courses to January. So they started January this year rather than September. And this allowed us to firstly see what other universities were doing in their approach to online teaching. So the basic online learning changed, obviously. So this moved to online Teams meeting for some workshops, for some lectures, but we also had pre-recorded material followed by Q&A sessions, just to accommodate maybe some different internet issues, but also different time zones, as obviously not all the students were in the UK. For example, we've got some students in Hong Kong, so having that pre-recorded lecture material meant that they weren't as confined to our timetable. But also we realized that collaboration and seeing what other people have done was really key. And I think that's one of the nice things that the pandemic offered us is that a lot of people were very open with the different approaches that they tried. So for us, social media was really great. Lots of people shared resources and their experiences. We also found quite a few different blog posts. So you're probably familiar with Lecture Remotely. There's also a blog run by Dr. Tom Basendale, the We Are Forensics blog, which is really nice because he also has started feeding back about how he's found the online approaches as well as the students' opinion. And then also obviously the Remote Forensics YouTube channel sort of highlighted different programs to us as well. In addition to this, and this sort of goes back to us being in a fortunate position of starting later than the majority of undergraduate programs, but also master's programs, is this program that KCL ran called 11 Cs. And this is where academics sort of highlighted different things that they tried. For example, in our pharmacy's summer school program, they explained how they ran different practicals, whether this is students giving them their experiments, and then the academic would go and run that experiment for them and give the real-time data to the students, but also how different softwares can sort of stream from the computers within the lab back to the students' personal laptops. And previous experience was also key. So I was fortunate enough to have some teaching experience on these practicals myself, so that helped the planning process, but we also made sure we collaborated with other academics who helped run these practicals in the past and how they envisioned this could be run online. Next slide, please. So this is our workflow. So we'll just take you through sort of our thinking pattern. So we obviously had our previous practicals with how they were run in person before the pandemic. So then our next step was to identify what of these protocols can be put online, what can we keep, what do we think would transfer well over to an online format. And then using that, we started to write a new protocol. And this, I think, is really key, that we had to establish new aims. Some we could keep, especially the data analysis side of things. And that's, I think, has been a real benefit about running these online practicals, is that you can have a different emphasis on different skills that would be maybe slightly overshadowed by being in that laboratory environment. So that was really key. And then also, how could we continue answering some of the already outstanding aims of the protocols?
And then the next step, obviously, in our workflow is to identify videos. Specifically, we were trying to research around what is kind of up and coming, what is the new way in which not only forensics is heading in terms of kind of our way of delivering material, but also the wider kind of subjects. And there are a few areas where 360 videos and 360 imaging have been used, but more kind of a virtual reality. But we wanted to create something that's real and lifelike, because it's important to highlight that students haven't actually seen the facilities that they're going to be working in. So we wanted to provide them with a familiarity of when the lockdown and everything starts to open up and we allow practicals, that they are familiar with that setting. So we decided to kind of stick with a variety of media, one being 360 imagery, basic images, 360 video, and kind of amalgamate that into what we have created as a virtual tour of a laboratory, adding hotspots onto the virtual tool to help them and kind of encompass it into one product. So as part of our workflow, we had determined which one would suit the aspects of the practical, because obviously you don't want to be creating 360 for the sake of creating 360 imagery, but also we need to kind of make sure that we knew what media were going to be complementing those different media types. And then obviously we came to our final HyperFlex product, which is a virtual tour of the analytical suite at King's College, and there are various hotspots to complement the learning. So you'd have a series of either the lecture, videos of the team actually analysing certain compounds, and then obviously then have tasks either whether through e-learning to interpret or look at kind of changing the different parameters of the instrument to get better understand how the instrument works. And again, we wanted to create something that was immersive, something that they could visually see, something that can divulge them into the scenario where they're going to be working in the year to come. And so this really is what we wanted to create. And I'm just going to give you an example on the next slide. Hopefully, we had a few. So this is just a test that we actually did. So if I was able to, obviously the quality, because of the bandwidth, the quality is of greater. Oh, there you go. It's just my luck. So you can see actually, this is an example of the 360. If I then go back and pause it, what the students are able to do is then guide through the 360. I'm not going to be able to show you the virtual tour today, but we have provided a video on YouTube, so you can watch that and see the different areas of how we're able to add hotspots and images in a different media to complement the education. But this is just an example of the 360 imagery. So this is outside King's College, the Franklin Wilson building, and this is exactly the first 360 image that the students see. So the quality isn't this exact quality. It is much better, but I think it's just the bandwidth that we're having issues with, unfortunately. So go on to the slide. We will provide you with the video link, so you can, and after the presentation, you can go and actually watch that and see the detail of the actual virtual tour. And so this slide here really gives you an indication. So again, we've just amended the virtual tour, so the students are aware of the virtual tour here in this slide here. I'm just going to put the laser pointer on. So this slide, this picture here is the front of the building, and this guides them into the building. So you basically click on this hotspot there, which guides you in. And this is to the right is what an example of the information that you're given. So this is for the Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy, and so this is above the actual instrument. And here you can see that this is a video of the PowerPoint. This is a zoomed in picture of the instrument itself, and these video series here are of a colleague of ours at St George's actually conducting the analysis of the FTI, or of an unknown substance. And then this here is part of the e-learning, which can be integrated into the virtual learning environment, and that specific e-learning is looking at the comparisons of infrared spectra to a standard, and so what they're able to do is look at the spectra and make direct comparisons within the virtual tour, which is quite helpful, because a lot of the issues where we try to mirror them, we couldn't actually do that and actually make notes, but that allowed us to actually get a direct comparison. Caroline?
Yeah, so I thought we would also share some of our initial feedback. So we ran our first virtual lab session for this module on Wednesday, and we covered gas chromatography and high pressure liquid chromatography. And I won't read out all the feedback. Generally, we got the feedback saying students enjoyed it because it allowed them to get a sort of a better grip of the theoretical knowledge that they've been taught in lecture, which may not have always been able to sort of practice. So it was more sort of really the calculations, analysis of chromatograms, and yeah, so I think they really appreciated that more hands-on feedback. Obviously, a lot of them sort of said it didn't quite substitute the actual lab experience. So I think that's something that definitely we can sort of take forward if we wanted to use this kind of software as a pre-lab experience. And I think also because on my course the day before they ran some more virtual labs, but that just used pre-filmed videos, and in those they actually watched the lab demonstrators conduct the experiment, and they said they found that a lot more helpful to actually see how you went from doing the experiment to getting the results. So I think again that would be something more that we can incorporate into this type of virtual reality, actually show the injections onto the gas chromatography system and how you do that data accumulation. I think and this is obviously because we had about 40 students, I think the server did get overwhelmed at times. So I think that's something also to bear in mind. So some students sort of commented it didn't always work that clearly with them. But again, if you've got smaller groups, and obviously on master programs, you do tend to have those smaller cohorts. I think that's something, again, as a first try, I think it went very well, but there's obviously things that we can learn from. And I think that's really great that we've also got a group of students that offer quite useful and constructive feedback. Then next, our thoughts. I thought I also just would highlight how we found it. So pros, definitely, it allowed us to see that students grasped a better understanding of the theoretical side of things, including calculations. I had a real good moment with one of my students where, after not understanding the classic C1V1 equation, after having to practice it 4 times in one of our practicals, she was like, I finally get this. So that was really rewarding to see. And we also used some additional software that were simulations of the equipment, and students fed back that it was nice that they could try changing different parameters that may not have been realistic to do in a laboratory setting, but also they may have been too scared to do it. So it allowed them to test these things without worrying about breaking the equipment, but also getting a much quicker turnaround of results. And then also in the virtual laboratory, which I thought was quite nice, is that we had 360 images of inside the equipment, and that's not always possible when we're actually using those instruments within the laboratory setting. So it gave the students a better understanding of what goes on inside of the instruments. Cons, I think definitely having lost that face-to-face interaction means that explaining things to students can take a bit longer. But I think the main thing is that you really rely on students interacting with you. So you can't track the students' progress as much as you can in the lab, where you can just walk around and even check in with those that seem to be doing well. So I think that's one of the biggest downsides to online practicals, but maybe you can also incorporate sort of more checkpoints. So students maybe giving you their results halfway through the session, and incorporating those kind of things. So again, it's something that you can work around. And with that, I think I will just like to say a few thank yous. So if we move on to the last slide, Jonathan. We've got a few more. Sorry, I'm ahead of myself. And I just thought I'd share some of these tools that we use. So we used a range of different simulations. As I mentioned, we used the HPLC one that's called Beer Laws, but that basically explored UV Vis. And that was quite nice. It allowed students to actually change different parameters themselves. So for the HPLC one, they could change the column length and get the results straight away and see how that affected the retention time. Some of you may also be familiar with Labster, so we incorporated that into, we asked them to do calculations on concentrations, and then that quite nicely showed them how you prepare that solution within the laboratory, as well as using Chrome Academy, which is a really useful tool, and also thanks to YouTube, where you can pretty much find a video for anything. So we also showed some students how you do manual injections of gas chromatography. And now's the thank you slide. So firstly, if you'd like to find out any more, do get in touch with myself or Jonathan. Probably Jonathan for more of the 360 side of this talk. He really put that all together for us. But also thank you to these individuals who helped us put together some of the content that we ended up putting on our virtual tour, and also Dr. Tom Basendale, who introduced us to a lot of the online simulation programs that we ended up using. Also, if you want to find out more about King's Forensics, we've got Twitter, but also there's our website link. So thank you all for listening as well, and we're happy to answer any questions.
I would just like to thank also, there's another organisation that really helped us, particularly me in terms of the technical aspects, is River. I know they're very, I would consider them the kind of the leading market around virtual reality for teaching, and kind of developing around forensic science and photogrammetry in 360. I'd just like to really thank them for some of their support in terms of helping me to think about some of the aspects around virtual reality. If you haven't checked out any of their stuff, I would definitely recommend. But I think the Homo kind of message here is kind of, we wanted to produce something that's a proof of concept, something that we can reuse as a product for our students. And I think everyone kind of combined, and we kind of had a collaborative effort to really put something together that hopefully we will be able to use in the future from years to years. And I can't reiterate, thank you again for all the people, just as Caroline mentioned, thank you. Can't thank you enough. So yeah, and thank you again for Remote Forensics for allowing us to talk. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really great to see these kind of talks. We've had a few people talk about remote VR, AR kind of experiences in the crime scene, but so far we've not had one in the laboratory environment. So it's nice to see that technology used there. A few people apologise, I've had to nip off because we're at 3 o'clock, but I've captured a few questions which I know will interest our audiences, and I've come up in the CSI side of things as well. So the first one is about your own software backgrounds. So one challenge academics reported is, though they want to do these things, they're worried about the technical skills they need to. So perhaps to Jonathan, I think you built that, what skill set do you need in order to create it?
I think it's so my skill set had come from, because obviously I'm a practitioner as well, and recording the scenes is very basic, and I think if you are interested, I'd really get in touch with River about how to do that, because I have learned over the kind of maybe year that I've known them a lot of tips, but it is very basic. I wouldn't be afraid of it at all. And there are a lot of people out there that can help in terms of kind of how to complement the 360. So it's not that daunting, although it may look it. It really isn't. I think in all, I think it took me and Caroline to record the pictures. I think it was probably a day and a half to record the 360 material, and I think it took me about maybe 3-4 days to really put it all together, in terms of the hotspots, and creating the e-learning. So all in all, it doesn't take that long. I think it just kind of frightens a lot of people off because of the kind of potential, like you say, the technological aspects that they think are associated with it.
Thank you. Second question, which may be more for Caroline, is that when you've got a great tool like this, how do you integrate it into your normal lesson plan? How do you instruct students how to interact with it and build it into your lesson plan?
So we gave the students the session outline, and then we had a very clear worksheet for them. So we for them to work through. And I think also what we may not have mentioned is that we all met together on Teams at the beginning of the day and then outlined the session to them. And then we all stayed on Teams to, in case they have any questions, any queries. But we basically sort of just said we let them loose in the virtual lab, and gave them the tools to work through it independently, using the worksheet that we provided, all the while still being online to offer them any advice and queries, if they had any.
Thank you. My last question, which is the same one I asked to Helen, is about looking forward to return to campus and how you feel such tools can be integrated into your normal practical experience. As someone said in a previous talk, you can't break a virtual machine.
Caroline, do you want to take this? Do you want me to?
I don't mind. I'll sort of say my thoughts maybe. Yeah. So I think a lot of students said it definitely didn't replace sort of that hands-on experience. So they wouldn't say they would have felt confident to just go into the lab and run a sample on the HPLC or prepare a solution. And I think we also emphasised that it was more sort of the analytical skills that we were building during these workshops. But I think also our aim when we were producing the virtual lab was to help them orientate themselves in that laboratory setting. And I think that's something that Jonathon captured quite well. So I think that's what I would have sort of thought of the process, but and that could, going forward, that could be used as part of the induction week, just sort of being like, these are the labs you'll be working in, these are the types of equipment you'll be using. So yeah, Jonathon, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, no, I was just going to add, I think one of the comments from the students, so we had over 40 feedback sheets now from the students, which is amazing, and that's from just one session, so we're hopefully going to double that. So to be able to have 80 sheets of feedback would be incredible. And one of the comments that really stuck out for me was, and I haven't really thought about it, was the ability to go back to the practical and actually rehearse what they did. I think was one of the benefits that one of the students highlighted, because once you've done that practical, all you have in essence is that kind of paper form, and for some students they aren't able to repeat that practical. So I think being able to record it and actually allow the students to go back to that environment and to take that practical, I think for those that are more practical learners, really helps them better understand the concepts. And I think that was key as well in terms of being able to rehearse that information. I think would be great to allow the pre-lab to allow that. I think that's something that I would want to add. Yeah.
Thank you both. Both very reassuring comments. I think the freedom to fail in a virtual environment where there's not people watching, or you can't potentially damage some expensive equipment, is a very, very powerful learning tool. So that's the end of the questions. So just before I hand you back to Rachel for a final word, I just want to say thank you very much. Excellent talk, and I look forward to looking at your YouTube video once the event's finished.